The apartment is small but deliberate. Every object is in its place. A framed quote above the desk reads, "Precision is a form of love." Legal pads are stacked by the windowsill. There are no dishes in the sink. This is a woman who manages disorder by eliminating it. Keisha sits at the kitchen table. A mug of tea steams beside her, untouched. She is wearing a gray cardigan. She looks like she has been awake since before the camera arrived. She looks directly into the lens. Like and subscribe the channel and tell us in comments from where you are watching this video. Kisha. She told me it was mine for 15 years. Not once. Not as a passing comment. 15 years of the same promise, repeated at holidays, in letters, in phone calls, in the way she'd open that box and say, she'd always say it the same way she'd say, "Keisha, all of this is going to you." Every piece. The pearls, the gold earrings, the charm bracelet, the brooch she wore to church every single Easter Sunday for 40 years. All of it, mine, she said so. She said so over and over again, and I believed her because why would I not believe her? She was my aunt. She was the most consistent person in my life. Kisha. She left it to someone she met in year 10. A woman I had never been introduced to. A woman I did not know existed in the way that she existed in my aunt's life. And I found that out from a lawyer. On a Tuesday afternoon. 3 weeks after we buried her. Kisha. This is the story of the 82 days between that phone call and the day I finally understood what happened. I'm not saying I'm over it. I'm saying I understand it now. Those are two very different things, and I think people confuse them. We move through Keisha's morning routine. She is efficient without being cold. She measures her coffee. She checks her legal calendar before she checks her phone. There is a small photograph on her desk. A woman in her 60s with reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, laughing at something outside the frame. That is Evelyn. I grew up between two households. My mother moved a lot. She's not a bad person, she just never found her footing in one place for very long. After my parents split when I was 9, I started spending more and more time with Evelyn. She lived in Silver Spring, same house for 31 years, same phone number, same kitchen that smelled like pine sol and whatever was on the stove. She was the anchor point of my entire childhood. Keisha pauses at the photograph. She doesn't say anything for a moment. She never had children. That was a choice she made early and she never seemed to mourn it, at least not in front of me. But she poured something into me that felt, I don't know, it felt intentional. Like she had decided I was going to be the recipient of everything she had to give. Her time, her stories, her attention, her jewelry. We see archival photographs. Keisha at 7, sitting on Evelyn's front porch. Keisha at 12, wearing one of Evelyn's gold necklaces and laughing. Keisha at her law school graduation, Evelyn standing beside her, beaming, a hand on the small of Keisha's back as if she's holding her up even as she celebrates. She was at every important thing. My high school graduation, my college graduation. When I passed the paralegal certification exam, she drove 4 hours to take me to dinner. She ordered champagne and she made the waiter take 4 photographs because she kept blinking in them. That was Evelyn. That was who she was to me. Kisha. I want to be clear about one thing before anything else. I was not a negligent niece. I visited, I called, I drove up every couple of months. I checked in on her medical appointments starting when she was in her late 60s. I paid attention. I was present. I'm not telling you that to make myself look good. I'm telling you that because the question I kept asking myself after all of this was whether I had somehow failed her, whether I hadn't shown up enough. Whether she had been trying to tell me something I missed, and I've had to make peace with the fact that I was there. I was genuinely there, and it still happened. Keisha pulls out her phone and opens a photos folder she has labeled simply, Evelyn's Things. She scrolls slowly, tilting the screen toward the camera occasionally so we can glimpse the images. A cream-colored jewelry box with a tarnished brass clasp, the interior lined in faded blue velvet. Kisha. The box itself was unremarkable. It wasn't antique. She'd had it since the 1980s, she told me once. What was inside was the thing. Kisha. The pearl necklace came from my great-grandmother. Her name was Viola. She was born in South Carolina in 1901 and she came north with her family during the second wave of the Great Migration, around 1952. The pearls came with her. She wore them to church, she wore them on special occasions. When Viola died, they went to her oldest daughter. When that daughter died, they went to Evelyn. And Evelyn said they were going to me. She said it explicitly. When I'm gone, you're going to be the one who tells your daughter about Viola. You're going to tell her where these came from and what they carried. Those weren't just pearls. They were a document. They were a record of a woman who walked out of the South with nothing and built something. And Evelyn knew that. She's the one who taught me to understand it that way. Keisha scrolls to another photo. Gold earrings, small hoops, slightly worn at the posts. Kisha. These belonged to my grandmother, Evelyn's mother, Lula. She wore them on her wedding day in 1959. She's wearing them in the only photograph that exists of that day. It's a black and white photo taken outside the church, and you can barely see the earrings, but Evelyn could always point to exactly where they were in the frame. She'd held that photograph so many times she had it memorized. Another photo, a charm bracelet, heavy gold with small pendants, a cross, a tiny shoe, a heart with a date engraved. Kisha. The bracelet was Evelyn's own. She started it in the 1970s and added to it over the decades. Each charm meant something. The cross was from her first apartment, a little church near where she lived in Baltimore. The shoe was from when she ran a 5K at 55. The heart has the date she was accepted to her nursing program engraved on it. She was a nurse for 28 years. This was her autobiography, worn on her wrist. She'd told me the story of every single charm, multiple times, because she was making sure I remembered. She was rehearsing me. She was preparing me to be the keeper. Kisha. And then there was the brooch. An Art Deco piece, gold and enamel with a small cluster of seed pearls at the center. She wore it to church every Easter. I can see it in my mind right now. It sat at the collar of her good blue coat, every Easter, for as long as I can remember. When I picture Evelyn dressed up, I picture that brooch. Kisha. I want you to understand what I'm talking about when I say jewelry. I'm not talking about things that sparkle. I'm talking about my family's evidence that it existed, proof that these women were here. These were the documents that survived when so much else didn't, and I was supposed to be the one who carried them forward. That was the agreement. That was what she told me, for 15 years. Keisha is a paralegal. When she reconstructs a timeline, she does it methodically. She has, in fact, created a document, a simple list on a legal pad, of every instance she can remember or verify in which Evelyn made the promise. Kisha. The first time was 2008. I was 20. I was home for the summer between my sophomore and junior year of college, staying with her for a few weeks because my mother's apartment was too small and too chaotic. One evening, Evelyn went to her room and came back with the jewelry box. She just set it on the coffee table and opened it, like she'd decided something. She went through every piece, told me the story behind each one, and at the end she said, "When I go, Keisha, all of this is yours. I want you to know that. I want it to be on the record between us." I said, "Aunt Evelyn, you're not going anywhere." She said, "I know, but I want it to be on the record anyway." Kisha. The second time I specifically remember was Thanksgiving 2010. She'd had a little health scare, nothing serious, a blood pressure episode, and I think it made her think about things. She brought up the jewelry unprompted. We were washing dishes and she said, "You remember what I told you about the jewelry?" I said yes. She said, "Good, that's still the plan." Kisha. In 2012, she wrote me a letter. I have kept every letter Evelyn ever sent me because she was one of the last people I knew who still wrote letters. This one was mostly about regular things. She'd been to see a production of something at the Kennedy Center. She had a new neighbor who played piano at strange hours. Her tomatoes had done well that summer. But at the end, she wrote, "I want you to know that when I am gone, the jewelry goes to you, all of it. You are the one who will know what to do with it and what to say about it. I am sure of that." KISHA. 2014 mentioned at Christmas dinner. 2015 mentioned when I called her on her birthday, she brought it up herself. 2016 we had a conversation about estate planning generally and she said it again explicitly. 2017 she showed me a photograph she'd taken of each piece separately so I would have a visual record. 2018, the last time I remember it clearly. She said, "You still know what I've promised you." I said yes. She said, "Hold on to that." KISHA. I want to be clear that this was not an obsessive thing. She wasn't bringing it up every 6 months in a way that felt anxious or uncertain. It came up naturally. It was part of the fabric of our relationship, this understanding that she had chosen me to carry this forward. She wanted me to know. She was deliberate. And I trusted her completely because she had never in her life given me a reason not to. I keep returning to that last line. Hold on to that. As if she already knew that holding onto it was going to be the hard part. We are now in the years Keisha is reconstructing secondhand, the years she wasn't in the room. KISHA. Evelyn first mentioned Helen around late 2016, maybe early 2017. I don't have the exact date. She said she had a new neighbor who'd moved in next door. The previous tenant had been a young couple who were noisy and inconsiderate, and apparently Helen was a considerable improvement. She said she was a retired schoolteacher, that she was quiet, that she kept a nice garden, that she'd come over once to borrow a cup of something, and they'd ended up talking for 2 hours. KISHA. I was glad. Evelyn was in her late 60s by then and I worried sometimes about her being isolated. She'd outlived most of her close friends. Her social world had contracted. So when she mentioned Helen, my reaction was genuine relief. I thought, good, she has someone nearby, that's a good thing. KISHA. But I want to be honest about something. I filed Helen away as the neighbor. I didn't ask a lot of questions. I didn't ask her name for several months. I didn't ask to meet her. I assumed she was pleasant company and I was grateful for that and I moved on. My life was busy. I had just gotten a more senior position at the firm. I was dealing with my own things. I did not understand that what was happening next door to my aunt's house was not a casual friendship. I did not understand how deep it had become or how quickly. And here's the thing about being 4 hours away. You hear what someone tells you, you don't see what they don't say. Evelyn wasn't hiding Helen from me. She was mentioning her, sharing stories, telling me about their walks and their coffee mornings. But she wasn't telling me what Helen meant to her, and I didn't know enough to ask. We cut to an exterior shot of Evelyn's house, a brick row house in Silver Spring, Maryland, a small front porch with a wrought iron railing, a garden bed that has recently been tended. Helen's house is right next door. There is perhaps 8 feet of air between their front doors. Keisha looks at the photograph of the two houses. KISHA. 8 feet, they were 8 feet apart. And in those last few years, those 8 feet became a bridge that got crossed multiple times a day. I know that now. I didn't know it then. James Ford's office is deliberately neutral. Law degrees and a few civic service plaques on the wall. He has a glass of water he doesn't drink. He speaks with the careful precision of a man who has had many hard conversations and has learned to make them as clean as possible. James Ford. Evelyn Young was a client of mine for approximately 12 years. She first came to me to update a will she'd had drafted elsewhere that contained some language she'd become uncomfortable with. She was thorough, she was thoughtful, and I'll say this, she was unusually prepared. She came to every meeting with notes. She knew what she wanted, and she knew what questions to ask. James Ford. The original will was executed in 2012. It was comprehensive for her estate. Personal property, specifically the jewelry collection, was designated to go to her niece, Keisha Young. That was in the will for 7 years. James Ford. In 2019, Ms. Young contacted my office and said she wanted to make a change. We met twice. She was clear about what she wanted. She wanted to execute a codicil, that's an amendment to an existing will that would change the disposition of the personal property. Specifically the jewelry. She wanted it to go to Helen Carter instead. James Ford. I asked her, as I always do when a significant change is being made, whether she wanted to walk through her reasoning. Not because I needed to know it or because it was legally required, but because I find it helps people feel clear about what they're doing. She said, and I'm summarizing, not quoting, she said that she had thought about it for a long time and she was certain. She said the right person had become clear to her, and she trusted that clarity. James Ford. She did not name Keisha Young in our conversations. She did not say anything disparaging about any family member. She simply said this was the change she wanted to make, and she made it. The codicil was properly signed, properly witnessed. 3 years later she passed away. The will and codicil together constituted her final instructions. Those instructions were followed. James Ford. I want to be careful here. I can speak to what was in the documents and when they were signed. I cannot speak to the relationship between these individuals. I cannot tell you what was in her heart. That's not something the law can document. KISHA. He's right, the law can't document what's in someone's heart. That's exactly the problem. 3 weeks after Evelyn's funeral, a Tuesday, Keisha was at her desk at the law firm, eating lunch at her computer, something she almost never does. The call came from a number she recognized as Ford's office. KISHA. I stepped into a conference room because I didn't want to take it at my desk. I don't know why, maybe I already sensed it wasn't going to be a simple call. The firm was quiet. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I sat down at this long conference table we have and I answered. KISHA. He read through the estate. The house and accounts were going to my cousin Gerald, who had been managing Evelyn's finances for the last couple of years and was named as executor. I knew about that. I'd known for a while. I didn't have strong feelings about it. Then he said, personal property, specifically the jewelry collection, is designated in the codicil executed June 14, 2019, to go to Helen Carter of Silver Spring, Maryland. KISHA. I said, I'm sorry. He said, the jewelry collection is designated to go to Helen Carter. I said, I need you to say that one more time. And he did, and I sat in that conference room for a while after we hung up. I want to describe what it felt like because people ask me that. They say, what went through your mind? And the honest answer is, nothing at first. There was this blankness, like a hard drive erasing. And then, slowly, things started coming back online, and the first thing that came back was not grief. It was like watching a building you trusted turn out to have been made of a different material than you thought. The structure looked the same. But something fundamental about it had changed. KISHA. I called my mother. I said, did you know about this? She said, about what? I told her. And she was quiet for a moment. And then she said, Keisha, your aunt kept a lot to herself. And something in the way she said it, not surprised, not shocked, just tired and already accepting, made me realize there was more to know. There was a whole story I hadn't been given access to. Keisha's mother, Diane, is interviewed separately. She is a small woman with a direct gaze and the particular manner of someone who has long since made peace with complexity. She lives in Baltimore now. She has a cat, which keeps appearing at the edge of the frame. Diane. Evelyn and I, we were sisters. We loved each other, but we were not simple with each other. No sisters are, I think, but especially not us. We had different ways of doing everything. Different ideas about what family meant, what showing up meant, what asking for help meant. Diane. Evelyn would never ask for help. Never. That was fundamental to who she was. She had been the oldest child in a household that needed her to be competent, and she had never stopped being that. She did not know how to let people take care of her. It wasn't stubbornness. It was how she was built. Diane scratches the cat absently. Dine. I knew she wasn't doing well in those last few years. She didn't tell me how bad it was, but I could hear it in the phone calls. She'd repeat things. She'd lose the thread of a sentence. She was frightened, I think, even if she'd never have said so. And she didn't want Keisha to see that. Keisha was her. Keisha was the thing she was most proud of in the world. She didn't want Keisha coming in to manage her decline. She couldn't bear it. Dine. When Keisha called me after the lawyer's call, I wasn't surprised. I don't mean I knew about the specific change. I didn't. But I wasn't surprised that Evelyn had found a way to protect Keisha even as she was dying. That was entirely consistent with who she was. She thought giving Keisha her final years of caregiving to deal with was a burden. She thought removing herself was a gift. A pause. Dine. She was wrong about that. But that was the logic, and you can understand the logic and still grieve the result. Keisha names this period specifically. From the Tuesday of the lawyer's call to the day she finally met Helen Carter was 82 days. In that time, she went through what she describes as several distinct phases. KISHA. Phase 1 was anger, clean, clear anger. I was furious at Evelyn. Not at Helen, not yet, at Evelyn, because you don't tell someone something for 15 years and then change it without a word. You just don't. I didn't care what her reasons were. It felt like a lie, and it felt like she had looked me in the face over and over again and said something she knew might not be true, or that she at least knew she was reserving the right to make not true, and she never told me. She never gave me the chance to understand. I was angry at a dead woman. That's a specific kind of grief that people don't talk about enough. There's no one to be angry at. There's no one to call and say, "Explain this to me." There's no conversation to have. She took the explanation with her, and I'm left here trying to reconstruct a decision she never shared. KISHA. Phase 2 was, and I'm not proud of this, but I'm going to say it, Phase 2 was turning the anger on myself. I started asking whether I had done something to cause this, whether I had been a bad niece in some way I hadn't recognized, whether she had pulled back from me and I hadn't noticed. I went back through our last conversations in my head, looking for evidence of distance, looking for a moment where something shifted, and I couldn't find it. Our last phone call, 2 days before she went into the hospital for the last time, was warm. She told me about a book she was reading. She asked me how work was going. She said, "I love you, baby." She said it the way she always said it. Nothing was different. KISHA. Phase 3 was the legal research. I'm a paralegal. It's what I do when I need to feel like I'm doing something. I looked into verbal bequests. I looked at whether a codicil could be challenged. The answer was no, not with any real foundation. A verbal promise is not a contract. Evelyn was of sound mind when she signed the codicil. The change was legal. The only thing that was legally dubious was how much it hurt. KISHA. Phase 4, and this took the longest, was asking a different question. Not how could she do this, but what was happening that I didn't know about. That's when I decided to write to Helen. Keisha wrote 4 drafts of the letter. She shows us the drafts on her laptop. The first one is angry, the second is controlled but cold, the third is closer, the fourth is the one she sent. She reads the final version. KISHA. Dear Miss Carter, my name is Keisha Young. Evelyn Young was my aunt and one of the most important people in my life for as long as I can remember. I have recently learned that she left you her jewelry collection, and I understand that you and she were close in her final years in a way that I was perhaps not fully aware of. KISHA. I am not writing to you to contest anything, to demand anything, or to make you feel that you owe me something. I have thought carefully about what I want from this letter, and I think what I want is simply this, to understand. I was not present for the last chapter of my aunt's life in the way that you were, and I am asking, as respectfully as I know how, whether you might be willing to share some of that chapter with me. Not the jewelry. The story. I think I need the story. KISHA. I know this is an unusual request, and I understand if you prefer not to respond. But if you are open to it, I would be grateful. Yours sincerely, Keisha Young. KISHA. I mailed it on a Wednesday. It was paper, a real letter, because that's what Evelyn did and it felt right. Helen wrote back in 5 days. Handwritten, on notecard stationery with small blue flowers at the top. She said she had been hoping someone from the family would reach out. She said she had things she wanted to share. She said she would like very much to meet. I held that note card for a long time. Blue flowers. Evelyn would have liked that stationery. Helen Carter is interviewed in her own home. The camera takes in the space. A warm, densely decorated living room with books on every surface, plants in every window, and a series of photographs on the mantel that includes, visible but not announced, a photograph of Evelyn. Helen is 68, with silver-streaked hair and the comfortable authority of a woman who spent decades managing rooms full of 12-year-olds. Helen. I want to start by saying something clearly. I did not pursue Evelyn's friendship in order to be in her will. I was not positioning myself for anything. I moved in next door in 2016, and she knocked on my door 3 days later with a plate of lemon squares and introduced herself. That was Evelyn. She was not a woman who waited for things to come to her. Helen. We became friends the way that people who are neighbors and compatible and have time on their hands sometimes do. We had coffee. We walked. We watched a lot of British mysteries together. She was funny, genuinely, surprisingly funny, with this very dry delivery that would catch you off guard. I adored her from quite early on. Helen. Things changed in 2018. I noticed it before she acknowledged it, and she acknowledged it before she'd let me help with it. She started having trouble with sequences, not remembering whether she'd taken her medication, getting confused about what day it was, losing words mid-sentence and then laughing it off. I recognized it. I had watched my own mother go through something similar. I knew what it was, and I knew what was coming. Helen. She was frightened. That's the thing I want people to understand. Evelyn was not a fearful woman as a general rule, but this frightened her. Losing her mind, even gently, even slowly, it horrified her. And the horror was private. She didn't want people to see it. Helen. I started coming over more. Not in a way that felt like caregiving, she wouldn't have stood for that framing. I'd bring something for dinner. I'd suggest we watch something. I'd sit with her through the evenings because the evenings were when she got most confused and most scared. Sometimes we'd sit for hours without talking much. But I was there. I was there. Helen is quiet for a moment. Helen. She talked about Keisha constantly. Keisha should understand that. Her niece was, I heard about her 2 or 3 times a week. Her career, what she'd accomplished, how proud Evelyn was. She showed me photographs. She showed me every card Keisha sent. She loved that girl with everything she had. Helen. But she wouldn't call her. And I didn't fully understand why until one evening when we were sitting on the back porch and she said to me, and I remember this very clearly, she said, Helen, Keisha has her whole life in front of her, a real life, and I am not going to make her spend it watching me fall apart. I am not going to be that for her. And I said, Evelyn, she would want to be here. And she said, I know she would. That's exactly why I'm not telling her. Helen. She changed the will because I was present and she trusted me to treat those things with care. She knew their history. I'd sat with her while she told me every story. Every piece, every woman who'd worn it, every occasion it had marked. I listened. I asked questions. I think she felt that the pieces would be safe with me. And she also felt, I believe, that giving them to Keisha meant Keisha would know how bad things had gotten at the end. And she didn't want Keisha to carry that. Helen. She was wrong about that maybe. Maybe Keisha would have wanted to know. But I want to say this. Evelyn made that decision out of love. Misguided, overprotective, ultimately painful love. But love. Everything she did in those last years, she did out of love for her niece. Including the thing that broke Keisha's heart. Keisha and Helen met in person on a Saturday morning, 82 days after the lawyer's call. They met at Evelyn's house. Gerald had not yet sold it, and he allowed them to use it. Helen brought the jewelry box. KISHA. She was already there when I arrived. She was sitting on the front porch, And she stood up when she saw me coming up the walk. And she looked at me the way people look at you when they know they're carrying something that belongs to you, and they're trying to figure out how to give it back without dropping it. Kisha. We went inside. She'd made coffee, she knew where everything was, of course. We sat at Evelyn's kitchen table, at the same table where Evelyn had made me oatmeal for 20 years, where we'd done holiday meals, where I had sat and talked with her for countless hours over the course of my life. And Helen put the jewelry box on the table between us. Kisha. She said, "I want you to know that I know these belong to your history, not mine." And I said, "They belong to you legally. Evelyn made that choice." And she said, "Yes, but I wanted you to understand why she made it. And I think the only way you're going to understand it is if I tell you what those years were actually like." Kisha. She talked for almost 2 hours. She told me about the evenings. She told me about the bad nights when Evelyn couldn't find words for simple things and would get so frustrated she'd cry. She told me about the morning she found Evelyn on the back step, in her housecoat, not entirely sure how she'd gotten there. She told me about the conversations they had about death, direct, honest conversations that Evelyn apparently could only have with Helen, because with me, she always changed the subject. Kisha. She told me about the afternoon Evelyn said, "I need you to promise me something. When I go, don't let anyone fight over the things I loved. Let them go where they'll do the most good." And Helen told her she would. And then Evelyn said, "I'm going to change the will. The jewelry is going to you, because you're the one who knows the stories now and you're going to be the one who can tell them without falling apart." And Helen said, "Are you sure?" And Evelyn said, "I've been sure for a long time." She didn't tell me this to make me feel better. She told me because I asked for the truth and she gave it to me. That's what you get when you ask the right question, not comfort but accuracy. And accuracy, in this case, turned out to be more useful than comfort. We are back at Keisha's kitchen table. The same seat, the same light. The teacup is empty now. This is where she has been sitting at the beginning and end of every day for 82 days, and something about her is different. Not healed, not fixed, but different. Kisha. I need to tell you what I understand now, because it took me all of those 82 days to get here, and I think the path matters. Kisha. My aunt was not a woman who lied to me. She was a woman who made a promise in good faith, and then changed it for reasons she couldn't tell me without dismantling the very thing she was trying to protect. She thought I needed to believe that I was the keeper. She thought that promise was a gift she was giving me, and she kept giving it even after she knew she couldn't keep it, because the alternative, telling me the truth, telling me how sick she was, letting me see her fall apart, felt like a greater betrayal than the changed will. Kisha. She was trying to preserve my image of her. She wanted to be Evelyn, the anchor, the constant, the woman with the jewelry box and the lemon squares and the letters with perfect penmanship. She did not want to be someone I had to take care of. And so she chose the person who was already taking care of her, and she gave Helen the pieces, and she died with that decision made and never said a word. That's not a lie. That's a form of love so overprotective it becomes its own kind of wound. She was trying to give me everything except the chance to give anything back. And what I wanted, what I have always wanted, was the chance to give something back. Kisha. Helen reached across the table at one point, while she was telling me all of this, and she just put her hand on mine for a moment, and she said, "She talked about you every day, every single day. You were her whole heart, Keisha. Please don't let this make you think otherwise." Kisha. I don't have the jewelry. I'm not pretending that's okay. Those pieces belong to my history and I won't have them to pass down, and that's a real loss and I'm going to feel it for a long time. But I have the story now. I have the full story. I have the evenings on the back porch and the mornings Helen made sure she took her medication, and the afternoon Evelyn decided in her own quiet, certain way that the kindest thing she could do for me was to protect me from watching her disappear. I have all of that now. Kisha. It's not the justice of getting the jewelry back. It's the justice of finally knowing what happened and knowing that it happened inside a love that never stopped. That's what took 82 days. That's what the 82 days were for. Keisha is at her desk. She is working. Life has resumed its shape. On the corner of her desk, barely visible, is a small framed photograph, Evelyn at a holiday dinner mid-laugh, her good blue coat on, the Easter brooch at her collar. Helen and I have met 3 more times since that morning at Evelyn's house. We don't have an easy relationship, how could we? But we have an honest one. She has told me things about Evelyn's final years that I didn't know and couldn't have known. She has been generous with those stories in a way I didn't expect and don't take for granted. I still think Evelyn made the wrong choice. I still think she should have called me. I think she should have let me show up, let me sit with her through the bad nights, let me be the niece she had spent 30 years raising me to be. I think she robbed both of us of something real when she decided to protect me from the truth of her ending. But I also know that she made that choice inside the only love she had ever known how to give. Complete, overprotective, overpowering love that always put me first, even when putting me first meant putting me away. And I can hold both of those things, the grief and the understanding, the loss and the love. I can hold both of those things. She looks up from her desk, looks at the photograph, looks at the camera. KISHA. I still have the letter she sent me in 2012, the one where she said, "You are the one who will know what to do with it and what to say about it, I am sure of that." I think she was right. Even if she couldn't follow through, even if the jewelry went somewhere else, I still know what to say about it. I still know every story. You can't codicil away what somebody taught you. She gave me that. She gave me all of that, and that, I get to keep that. She turns back to her desk. The camera holds on her for a long moment, then slowly pulls back. Final title cards, white text on black. Keisha and Helen have since met 4 times. Helen has shared detailed stories of Evelyn's final years that Keisha says have been essential to her healing. Keisha is not pursuing any legal action. She says that was never the point. She still has the letter her aunt wrote in 2012. She keeps it in her desk drawer. She says she plans to tell the stories herself, to whoever will listen. Fade to black, end.